The call came in just after midnight, a calm voice on the other end. Too calm. A roommate reporting a missing college student, saying she hadn't come home, saying she was probably just stressed, overwhelmed, needed space. The kind of explanation that sounds reasonable until you realize how carefully it's been rehearsed. In America, thousands disappear every year. Most are found, some are not, and only a few, are never missing at all. They are already gone, and the person reporting them knows exactly where they are. And this story begins like so many others, inside an ordinary off-campus apartment near a quiet university town. A place built for ambition, not violence. Posters on the wall, dishes in the sink, a shared life divided by schedules and silence. 2 students, 2 futures. One of them would vanish without a trace, and the other would become the first voice to tell police a lie that would unravel into something far darker than anyone expected. And at first, there was nothing unusual. No broken windows, no signs of struggle, no frantic phone calls to parents, just a missing student and a roommate who seemed cooperative, helpful, even concerned. She described the last time she saw her roommate, what she was wearing, what mood she was in. She said there had been no arguments, no tension, nothing worth worrying about. But disappearances don't exist in a vacuum. They leave echoes. A skipped class, a phone that stops moving, a digital silence that feels wrong in a world where no one ever truly goes offline. Investigators began doing what they always do, reconstructing the last known hours, credit card records, cell towers, dorm cameras, and slowly, quietly, the story began to fracture. And because the timeline didn't breathe, it was too clean, too controlled. And when police asked the roommate the same questions again, hours later, then days later, small details shifted, a time changed. A door that was once open was now closed. A text message appeared that hadn't existed before. These weren't mistakes. They were adjustments. And behind the shared walls of that apartment, something had already been decided long before the missing person report was filed. This wasn't panic. This wasn't impulse. It was planning. And the most disturbing part wasn't the violence itself. It was how ordinary it looked from the outside, how easily it blended into student life, how close it came to being believed. And because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the stranger in the dark. It's the one sitting across from you, calmly helping police search for a body they already hid. And police began where they always do, with patterns. They mapped the missing student's life like an archaeologist brushing dust from fragile bone. Class attendance, campus card swipes, library logs, late-night food orders. Every routine leaves a rhythm, and when that rhythm stops, it tells you exactly when something broke, and her phone was the first to go silent, not dead. Just still, no steps logged, no pings moving across town. It last connected to the apartment 5 hours after the roommate claimed she'd left for the night. That detail alone was enough to reopen the door. Phones don't lie. They don't get confused. They don't forget. And when investigators returned to the apartment, the air felt different. Nothing obvious. But there's a difference between a place that's been lived in and a place that's been reset. A trash bag recently taken out. Sheets changed. A faint chemical smell that didn't belong to cleaning day. These weren't red flags. They were whispers, and the roommate welcomed them in again. Same calm voice. Same worried expression. She repeated her story almost perfectly, but not quite. The timing shifted by minutes. The tone changed when certain questions were asked. She avoided eye contact when police mentioned the bedroom. People think lies collapse loudly. They don't. They erode. And then came the search of the missing student's room. Her backpack was there, her laptop charger, clothes laid out as if she planned to return. On the desk, a half-written assignment saved on her computer. A future paused mid-sentence. No signs of packing. No goodbye messages, no reason to disappear. And investigators asked the roommate why the bedroom door had been locked from the outside, and she hesitated just long enough, and she said maybe it was old, maybe it stuck, maybe the missing student did it herself. Too many maybes. When people don't know the truth, they speculate. When they do know it, they explain, and digital forensics came next. Text messages between the 2 roommates told a story that words alone could not hide. Passive aggression, control disguised as concern. A slow buildup of resentment, jealousy, fear of abandonment. Messages sent and deleted. Drafts never meant to be read. Screenshots of arguments that ended with silence. And then something chilling, and a message sent from the missing student's phone after she was last seen alive. Short, casual, designed to buy time, to stop worry, to delay the search. And police didn't confront the roommate yet. They didn't need to. The apartment itself was already speaking, and every hour that passed made one truth impossible to escape. And this wasn't a disappearance. And it was a disappearance staged by someone who thought they understood people better than the system that would eventually catch them. And interrogations don't begin with accusations. They begin with silence. A quiet room, a recorder placed carefully on the table, two chairs facing each other like opposing mirrors. When the roommate sat down, she looked composed, hands folded, posture steady, eyes dry. She asked if she could help. She said she just wanted her roommate back, and detectives let her talk, and they asked about her childhood, her stress levels, her grades, her fears, and in those long unguarded answers, something surfaced that had nothing to do with the missing student and everything to do with motive. She spoke about being left behind, about friendships that turned on her, about people who used her and disappeared. A pattern of abandonment she carried like a wound, and then they circled back, gently, the night her roommate vanished, and she told the story again and again. Each time her voice stayed calm, but her language changed. Details became less visual, more abstract. The brain does that when it's no longer recalling memory, but maintaining a narrative. Real memories are messy, lies are smooth, and detectives showed her the phone data, the Wi-Fi connection, the message sent after the disappearance. She frowned, said it must be a glitch, said technology isn't perfect. She laughed softly as if amused by the idea that data could be trusted more than a human being. But then they mentioned the locked bedroom door, and her breathing changed, and just slightly. Enough, and she said she didn't remember locking it. Then she said she might have. Then she said she definitely didn't. The contradiction landed heavy in the room. People can forget details. They don't forget actions that require intention, and hours passed. The room grew colder. The tone shifted. Detectives asked about cleaning supplies, about bleach, about the trash taken out at 3 a.m. She said she couldn't sleep, that she cleans when she's anxious. Anxiety became her shield, but anxiety doesn't explain why neighbors heard movement late that night. Heavy movement, furniture scraping, a thud. Anxiety doesn't explain why the building's dumpster camera showed one person making multiple trips, alone. And when they finally pressed her, the mask cracked, not with tears, with anger. She accused police of blaming her because she was different, because she was too quiet. She said the missing student was reckless, unstable, capable of running away, and that was the moment detectives knew. And people who are innocent try to prove their truth. People who are guilty try to rewrite someone else's character. And behind that calm exterior was a story she hadn't expected to tell, one where control slipped, where obsession turned fatal, and where the act itself had already been justified long before it happened. But the hardest part wasn't getting her to talk, and it was finding where she had hidden what she didn't want anyone to ever see. And search warrants don't announce themselves with drama. They arrive as paperwork, signatures, quiet authority. When officers returned to the apartment with permission to tear it apart, the roommate watched from the hallway, wrapped in a blanket, eyes hollow now, the calm finally eroding under exhaustion. And they started small, floorboards, drains, trash bags collected from the building's bins and laid out like evidence of a life being unmade. Nothing at first. No blood, no weapon, no obvious mistake. It almost worked, almost, and then a technician noticed something wrong with the bedroom carpet. Not a stain, a distortion, fibers pressed down in a way that suggested weight, sustained pressure, as if something heavy had been there longer than it should have been. The carpet was pulled back. The padding beneath was darker, treated, cleaned too thoroughly, and walls were tested. A faint trace of biological material lit up under forensic spray, microscopic but undeniable. Cleaners erase what the eye can see. They don't erase what the body leaves behind. And the roommate was taken back in for questioning as the search expanded beyond the apartment. Cell phone location data placed her car in an industrial area hours after the supposed disappearance, an area she had no reason to visit. No classes, no friends, no errands, and surveillance footage filled in the gaps. Distant, a single car entering a service road late at night. No passenger visible, the trunk closed carefully, too carefully, and police followed the path backward, then forward. They searched wooded land near the access road, shallow soil, recently disturbed, a smell that doesn't belong in nature. It took less than an hour to find what she believed was gone forever, and the discovery wasn't cinematic. It was devastating. A young life reduced to evidence markers and silence. A future collapsed into a single location on a map. Officers stood quietly, some turning away. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a betrayal. And when confronted with the evidence, the roommate didn't scream. She didn't deny it. She sat very still and said one sentence that would haunt everyone in that room. And she was going to leave me. And in that moment, the missing person became a possession. The friendship became ownership, and the murder, at least in her mind, became prevention. And what police uncovered next wasn't just how it happened, and it was how long it had been planned. And what investigators uncovered next was not a moment of rage, but a timeline of intention. Notes saved in obscure folders, search histories buried beneath coursework and music playlists, Questions typed late at night about how long it takes for someone to lose consciousness, how to clean biological material, how long before a missing person report becomes urgent. These weren't curiosities. They were rehearsals, and the planning wasn't linear. It was obsessive, looped, repeated, as if she kept returning to the idea, testing it, refining it, convincing herself that she was the victim in a story that demanded an ending. Messages drafted but never sent, apologies written and erased. A digital diary of a mind trying to justify the unthinkable by breaking it into steps small enough to carry. And friends were interviewed. They spoke of tension in the apartment, of control disguised as concern, of one roommate monitoring the other's comings and goings, asking who she was with, when she'd be back, why plans changed. To outsiders, it sounded like closeness. To those who listened carefully, it sounded like fear. And the night it happened followed the script almost perfectly. A conversation, an argument that wasn't loud enough to draw attention. A moment where one person realized they were no longer safe, but too late to leave. The method was intimate, personal, the kind that requires proximity, the kind that leaves no room for doubt about intent, and afterward there was no panic, no frantic call for help. Just a body that needed to be hidden and a story that needed to be told. She showered. She changed clothes. She slept. In the morning, she attended class, and psychologists would later describe it as emotional dependency turned lethal. A belief that if she couldn't keep the relationship, no one could. That abandonment was a fate worse than prison, worse than death. So she chose the outcome she could control. And if you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? And when the confession finally came, it wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. She corrected detectives on minor details, as if accuracy mattered more than remorse. She spoke about the victim in past tense, then caught herself and smiled, not because it was funny, but because the performance was over. And the case file would eventually close. Court dates would come and go. Headlines would fade. But the truth remains, buried deeper than any shallow grave. And sometimes the real horror isn't that someone died, and it's that someone planned it and believed they were right. And the trial stripped away what little illusion remained. In the courtroom, the roommate sat motionless, dressed plainly, hair pulled back, expression neutral. No outbursts, no tears, just a person watching their own life become a public record. Jurors listened as prosecutors unfolded the timeline piece by piece, showing how every choice led here. Not by accident, but by design. And they heard about the messages, the searches, the rehearsed explanations. They heard how the missing person report wasn't a cry for help, but a calculated delay. Experts testified about fixation, about emotional dependency so extreme it becomes possession, about how some minds don't fear consequences the way others do, because the act itself already feels justified. And the defense tried to humanize her. They spoke of loneliness, of untreated mental strain, of the pressure cooker of academic life. They suggested it was a tragic loss of control, but the evidence told a different story. Loss of control doesn't leave checklists. It doesn't clean crime scenes. It doesn't practice lies. And the victim's family sat in silence. Parents who had sent their child to college believing education meant safety. They watched photos appear on screens, smiling, alive, unaware. They heard about her last moments described in clinical language that could never capture what was taken. No parent should have to learn how their child died, especially not in a room full of strangers. And when the verdict came, it was swift guilty. The word echoed heavy and final. The roommate didn't react, no collapse, no relief, just a slow blink, as if confirming something she had already accepted long ago. Sentencing followed months later, decades behind concrete walls, a life reduced to numbers and regulations, but prison doesn't end a story like this. It only contains it, and the apartment was cleaned and re-rented. New students moved in. They hung posters. They laughed. They slept where something unspeakable had once occurred. No plaque, no warning. America doesn't mark its quiet horrors. It builds over them. And the case slipped into true crime databases, into late-night forums, into the background noise of a country used to violence. Another name added to a list. Another tragedy filed away, and yet the most disturbing part remains unresolved. And not why she did it, but how close she came to getting away with it. And because if one message hadn't been mistimed, if one camera hadn't captured the wrong angle, if one officer hadn't noticed a detail too small to matter, and this would have stayed a missing person case. And the truth would still be buried. And long after the courtroom emptied, the case continued to breathe in quieter places. In police training rooms, in psychology lectures, in the private nightmares of those who worked it. This wasn't studied because it was sensational. It was studied because it was subtle, because nothing about it screamed danger until it was already over, and investigators would later say the warning signs were there, but scattered, Dependency framed as loyalty, isolation masked as closeness, control hidden behind concern. These are not the traits people are taught to fear. They are the traits we're told to trust. And the victim had tried to create distance. Friends testified to that. She had talked about moving out, about reclaiming space, about how heavy the apartment felt. Those words now read like a countdown. In cases like this, independence becomes the trigger. Not anger, not hate, separation. And America has a particular blindness when it comes to intimate violence that doesn't fit the usual mold. We look for monsters. We look for rage. We rarely look for quiet entitlement, the belief that someone else's presence is owed, and their absence is a betrayal that must be punished. And the apartment complex never made the news again. No one stood outside with candles. No memorial remained. Life resumed as it always does. But for those who know the address, it carries a different weight. A reminder that horror doesn't need isolation or poverty or chaos to grow. Sometimes it thrives in stability, and the victim's name is still spoken by her family every day, in small rituals, in empty rooms, in the future she never reached. Meanwhile, the person who ended her life exists in a system built to forget context. Inmates become numbers, motives become footnotes, but memory doesn't belong to institutions, it belongs to people. And this case endures not because of how it ended, but because of how normal it began. 2 students, 1 apartment, a friendship that slowly twisted into something fatal while everyone around them assumed nothing was wrong. And that's the quiet truth buried beneath this story. And the most dangerous plots don't look like crimes, and they look like relationships.